skeleton, you want to make sure that, especially for the frontal view of a skeleton, you want to make sure that you start off with a little head, like where your skull will be. I've divided my paper in half so I can have a nice center access to, draw the middle of the skeleton from the spine down to the pelvis bone, down to the legs, and I have my very symmetrical skeleton that I'll be drawing. I started off with a little circle and then added the jawbone area. Once I had a small skull, I used my fingers to find a measurement. And from this measurement, I dropped down and put a little tagline. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I was able to fit 7 lengths of a skull on this access point. Most skeletons and most bodies are 7 to 8 heads tall. And that's why I used 7. For proportions, to make sure that it looks somewhat proportional. So this may be a little shorter in stature in comparison to somebody who would have, 8 heads tall worth of their proportionate body. Now that I have the little skull drawn, I'm going to be going back to the image for reference of what comes next. So if my skull is this big, we can kind of start to lightly divide up our paper into little sections like this. Lightly. Nice and light. That way you can erase these marks later. And eventually I'll come back in and I'll erase all these little taglines. Looking at my point of reference, somewhere a little bit underneath your chin of your jawbone is kind of where your breastplate is. So about right here, and it comes to a little bit past this head mark. So I'm going to start off by drawing a little bit of this breastplate, kind of where your ribs meet. This is not anatomically correctly drawn yet, but it looks like a little tie, right? and I want to just keep that little tie-like shape there, and eventually I will shape it more and more like the actual bone piece that is where our ribs meet. Also, so kind of starting from top to bottom, just measuring out what goes where. The next piece is we do have our neck bones, right? Part of our vertebrae, which is behind this, but for now I'm just going to draw a little line from where our neck bones or our vertebrae are. From here, we are definitely going to have where our shoulders come off to the sides. So I'm going to draw little lines. This is kind of where that, shoulder bone, collarbones are located. To find the angle of how far do they come off our body, I'm going to be using my pencil as a sight line to my image that is on the slideshow. So I'm going to just look, and it looks kind of like out to here, out to here. And then right here is kind of a joint where our arms meet our clavicles and our scapulas. So I'm just going to put a little ball for right now, and eventually that'll turn into an actual drawing of the bone, of how the bone looks. But it is a ball joint, so by just drawing like a little circle, that kind of works. All right, and then right behind this little image is where our scapulas, I believe they're called, those larger bones in the back of our backs are located. So I'm going to draw that in a little bit. They're not that long. Actually, they kind of just come off like this. But once again, I'm just bringing out the basic shapes of our body. Well, the top of our backbones are kind of triangular in shape, but that the rib cage is a little bit more of like an oval or egg shape. So our ribs actually, they kind of start up over here, but just to make our shaping a little bit easier, I'm going to start it up here. And then come down to about here. And they're overlapping, right? It's overlapping where our scapulas are. So I can close this off, and now I have this kind of like little egg shape. But technically, we know our ribs come upward, right? So eventually I'll erase this bottom line. Kind of looks like the shape of our lungs. One of the #1 features of our ribs is to protect our lungs. So that's why it has very much of that lung-like shape. I know there's a lot of little lines everywhere. Eventually I will go through and I'll erase some of these lines, and then I'll put a darker pencil down in order to create definite line for bone structure. The next part is our hip bones, right? Our pelvis area. So back here we still have vertebrae, right? It connects from all the way from our neck all the way down to our tailbones, and our tailbone ends like about right here on a 7 head. So our tailbone will be somewhere right here. If our tailbone ends about right here, that means our pelvis bone is about the same width of our rib cage, and our pelvis bone kind of looks a little bit like a heart. So keeping my shapes really nice and simple right now, I'm going to draw like a heart shape. Eventually I'll make it more complex, but right now, just drawing like a little heart, or even like a kind of like butterfly wings. Okay, now, depending upon how many heads the length of this is, that's why I'm adjusting. You may look at a different image for proportions, and I'm just, making sure that my proportions are staying somewhat within where they belong. And every body is different. So remember, every body is different, meaning when you're drawing a real person, this may not be the same exact proportion measurements to that individual. They can change and fluctuate. So know that. And that is why when you take a life drawing class and you have live models come in, they usually bring in models of different ethnicities, different sizes, different body weights, because they're going to provide a variety of individuals, because one ethnic group to another ethnic group can be very, very different. Okay, so now I'm going to kind of draw where our femur starts, and I'm going to draw circles again, right? Easy peasy little circles. And that's kind of like where that hip bone meets your femur, and that is a ball joint as well. Like I said before, I will eventually make this look more official, but for now, a circle is totally fine. Our femurs are our biggest bone in our bodies. So this bone comes down from here all the way down to here. Mine's not exactly symmetrical, but that's okay. I'm trying. And then at this point, we have our knee. So I'm going to draw another little circle for our knees. Our knees are also a ball joint. And then we have, what is it, the tibula and fibula? Or is that in your arm? Yeah, the tibula and fibula. I think the radius and ulna are in your arms, but the tibula and fibula are down here. The only reason why I know that is because with playing roller derby, so many people break their ankles, and it's usually the tibula that gets broken. And sometimes you get a really bad break where like your bone actually protrudes, but I'm sure you've seen that, those of you that play sports, especially like football, sometimes you get some really gnarly breaks there. Okay, and then down here, I'm going to put a little circle also, and this is kind of where all those wonderful little foot bones will eventually end up. But because our drawings are a little tinier, like, you don't have to be exactly precise. Yes, I can move it up a bit. Let's see, right there, right? So right here, I'm drawing a little circle and drawing another little circle, and then I'm going to draw 2 different bones. So the first one is going to be on the inside. I don't remember which one is the tibula and which one is the fibula. So here is one line for that bone, and then here will be the other bone that comes out to the other side. So far, I have very basic shapes, correct? I haven't even drawn my arms in yet. I just drew where the joint is. I will draw the arms. I can't remember the name of this bone right now. Hold on. Let me see if I can see it. The humerus. I should have remembered that's when you hit your funny bone, right? Okay, the humerus starts about up here and it comes to about this length right here, okay? So I'm going to draw a straight line. That's how long your humerus is. And I'm going to draw a circle because that is also a socket joint, a ball socket joint, right? So here is my humerus, length of my humerus. And then we have our radius and we have our ulna. I did have that right. Awesome. And how long is that? Well, if you ever realize when you stand up nice and straight and you have your hands at your side, your hands come about to mid-thigh. So that means that your wrist is usually about right here on this line. So I'm drawing little circles for where your wrists are. We're going to draw one line for our ulna, one line for our radius, one line for my, I'm going to stick this hand out a little bit, so I'm going to bring it over here. One line for my ulna, one line for my radius. I'm going to erase that little guy. So that way my hand looks like it's sticking out. All right, so, and then we would draw our hands in eventually, and our hands are pretty long. Our hands usually come into where our mid-thigh is, so just gonna draw that. Eventually this will all become part of the hand, right? Like this will all be our hand area. Okay, so now if you were able to follow along, and if this is your first time drawing a skeleton, it's probably really, really hard at first, okay? And you may have to do this several times. That's why I'm having you draw it twice. And to practice. Practice, practice, practice. By the third time you draw this, you will be that much better at drawing a skeleton. I am going to actually end the video here and then make a second video after this explaining in more detail how to create your skeleton with more exact definition. So this is just how to lay out your proportions for the skeletal structure. And with that, I am going to end the record and we will pick up with the second record a little bit later.